Satellite Network Affiliates presents The Seminar Link with Zig Ziglar on qualities of success.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What terrific groups we have here today. I can definitely feel the energy out there. If you can feel it here in Salt Lake City, say yes. Yes. All right, I thought you might. How about you folks in Portland? Say yes if you can feel it. Yes. All right, and we have hundreds with us in Portland today who are braving torrential rain to be with us. Thank you, Portland. All right, what about our crowd in Kansas City? Can you feel it there? If you can, say yes. Yes. Oh, great. And a few hundred with us in Kansas City also experiencing some marginal weather with 50-knot winds, so thank you for coming. I think this is miraculous. One of the fringe benefits of traveling and speaking is experiencing high-energy groups, and boy, do we have 3 of them with us today. This idea of being in 3 places at one time is certainly better than spending 3 days on different airplanes in 3 different hotels, and it's a speaker's dream. I realize it's wonderful for you folks as well, and I'm sure a lot of you spend a great deal of time and money traveling to seminars yourselves, and I understand that it gets very expensive. I applaud Satellite Network Affiliates for making these excellent seminars so convenient and cost-effective for all of us. It's a fabulous approach to learning and improving ourselves. You may not be aware of the fact that SNA is currently establishing permanent downlink sites for seminars just like this one all over the country. That means you'll never have to travel to another seminar again. We'll all come to you. We've got some exciting things coming to you right now. Our speaker today is a longtime personal friend of mine. His inspirational ideas and concepts have helped literally hundreds of thousands of people in their personal, family, and professional lives. He's the author of 7 books, 5 of which made the bestseller list. His book, See You at the Top, was the 8th best-selling hardbound book in the country over the past decade. And now our speaker has 2 new best-selling books, one called Top Performance, and the other, Raising Positive Kids in a Negative World. His audio and video training programs are used by AT&T, General Motors, McDonald's, and countless other Fortune 500 companies, as well as the United States Navy, independent school districts, and hundreds of small businesses all over the free world. He's been featured on Donahue, 2020, 60 Minutes, The Hour of Power, as well as the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Yazoo City, Mississippi Herald. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my exciting privilege to present to you the man who gives hope, believability, Mr. Zig Ziglar. You're great, brother.
Thank you so much, John. My goodness alive. Well, I sure appreciate that introduction, and I appreciate the response we're getting here. And you know, Don mentioned the Yazoo City, Mississippi Herald. Now, I know a lot of folks go around the country trying to impress people by claiming to be from Yazoo City. But I really am. Now, what I like to do is I like to get every seminar started with exactly the same procedure. I always ask a question. The question I'm going to ask is a very simple question. How many of you folks here in Salt Lake City and in Portland and in Kansas City, how many of you folks have ever heard me before, or else this is your first time? Could I see your hands, please? All right. Well, it's sure nice to know that you're already here, not only physically, but also mentally. I read something the other day that just intrigued me no end. I read where every 3rd person was either remarkably handsome or amazingly beautiful. Now, what I'd like to get you to do right now is this. Look directly at the person on your left. I mean, look them over good right now. No, left. Now look directly at the person on your right. And if it ain't either one of them, guess who? I know you've heard about it. You know, Zsa Zsa has just come out with a new perfume. It's called Convicted. You just slap it on, is what you do. Well, I want to emphasize a point in our seminar today, and that's simple as this. You were born to win. In my mind, there's absolutely no doubt about it. You were born to win. And I want to start with a story which I think says a lot. The year is 1974. There's a game scheduled between Notre Dame University and the mighty UCLA Bruins. UCLA is running absolutely roughshod over the competition. They've won 10 of 12 national championships, including 7 in a row. They've got the longest unbeaten streak in college basketball history. They're the overwhelming favorite to beat Notre Dame. But Notre Dame has a new coach. This new coach is a fella named Digger Phelps. Now, Digger Phelps is excited, he's enthusiastic, he's all motivated, he's turned on, and he doesn't believe the media when they say that UCLA is going to be running roughshod over Notre Dame. Now, at the end of Monday's practice session, Digger had his team doing a most unusual thing. He had them run down to the end of the courts and cut down the nets. Now, folks, if you know anything at all about basketball, you know that they do not cut down the nets after the end of a practice session. They cut down the nets after they've beaten the bad guys across town, after they won the district or national championship, but not after a practice session. On Tuesday, Digger Phelps had his team go down to the end of the courts and cut down the nets again. By Wednesday, his guys were convinced that Digger was going to make them the best net cutter downers in all of college basketball. So by Thursday, they were highly motivated about cutting down those nets. I mean, they got good at it. And by Friday, listen, after Friday's session, they were motivated out of their gourd. So much so, as a matter of fact, they did it so good that it was almost anticlimactic when on Saturday, now I did say almost, when on Saturday, after pulling maybe the biggest upset in basketball history, Notre Dame beat mighty UCLA. They had won that game. Now, folks, you've got to know that I'm not going to have the audacity to stand here or maybe kneel here and tell you that the reason that Notre Dame won the game is because they had been practicing cutting down the nets all week long. But I will say this to you without any fear of error. That simply is this: you were born to win. But in order to be the winner you were born to be, you must plan to win, you've got to prepare to win, and you must expect to win. And if you don't plan to win, and if you don't prepare to win, then you have no legitimate reason for expecting to win. Whether you live in Salt Lake City, Portland, or Kansas City, you got to have a plan. Now, I want to emphasize something. Digger Phelps and his coaches put together a magnificent game plan. They worked hard all week long preparing for the game on Saturday. And then on Saturday, because they had planned to win and because they had prepared to win, they legitimately expected to win, and that is exactly what happened. That's what today is about. That's what this seminar is about. Planning to win and preparing to win and building within you that legitimate expectancy based on realistic observations, facts, and procedures, that if you'll take the first 2 steps, you have every right to expect to win and become the winner you were born to be. Not too long ago, I was coming in on a plane, which is generally the way I fly. And I was seated next to an old boy, and I couldn't help but notice that he had his wedding band on the index finger of his left hand. Now, that's a little unusual. And so I just commented on it. I said, "Friend, you got your wedding band on the wrong finger." And he said, "Yeah, I married the wrong woman." Well, you know, I don't know if he married the wrong woman or not. I'm just so delighted to be able to say that I did not marry the wrong woman. As a matter of fact, last November, the redhead and I, my wife is a decided redhead, meaning simply that one day she just decided that she was going to be a redhead. And she's an excited, decided redhead along about now. She was just inducted into the MasterCard Hall of Fame. And says she's going for a black belt in shopping. And I believe she's going to get it. True story, honest to goodness, true story. A couple of years ago, I came in, it was about 6:30 or 7. There was a note on my desk. It said, "Honey," said, "I have been feeling so depressed." She said, "I've gone downtown for a little retail therapy." When she got home, I could see immediately that she'd been in intensive care. Well, anyhow, I don't know if that old boy married the wrong woman or not, but I do know that a lot of people have got a lot of wrong ideas about what success is and about what it takes to be successful. Incidentally, I refer to my wife often, and when I talk about her, I simply call her the redhead. When I'm talking to her, it's Sugar Baby, and her name is Jean. I want to establish something here that's very important. Matter of fact, we'll build this seminar around 3 basic premises, and that simply is that you are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. Now, you can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. I want to emphasize that because that is an extraordinarily important part of what we go through. Now, I want to also tie to that the fact that life is a long series of choices. And if we make enough of the right choices, we will end up with the right results. For example, for 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. Now, the reason I say by choice is simply because I have never accidentally eaten anything. I mean, it's always been by choice. And if I choose to eat too much today, then I have chosen to weigh too much tomorrow. If I choose to get drunk tonight, then I have chosen to feel miserable tomorrow. Every choice has an end result. Now, you see, we can choose what we put into our mind. And when we choose the right thing to put in our mind, we have chosen the right thinking. We then have chosen the right actions, and the right action produces winners, ladies and gentlemen. Let me share something with you to emphasize the importance of input and expectancy in your mind. We teach a seminar in Dallas. It's called Literally Born to Win. People come from all over the world to attend. We had a young man there a couple of years ago named Samuel Akwasi Sarpong. Now, he's from the Ashanti tribe in the nation of Ghana. In his land, they name the babies, the children, based on the day of the week on which they're born. The fact that his name was Akwasi, now they have a couple of other names too. The fact that his name was Akwasi indicates that he was born on Sunday. Now, that simply in his language means godly, gentle, kind, and peace-loving. By coincidence, this young man was a Christian minister. Those who are born on Wednesday are named Kwaku. Now, Kwaku means mean, violent, aggressive, quick-tempered. By the strangest of coincidences, over 50% of all of the crime committed in the nation of Ghana is committed by those who are born on Wednesday. Sociologists say the only explanation they have is the fact that an expectancy is set up in the minds of the parents. Can't you just visualize the scene? Mom and Dad get the good news. They're going to have a baby. Can't you hear them just talking? Well, boy, I'm sure glad we're going to have us a baby, but boy, I hope that kid doesn't get here on Wednesday. And then can't you imagine little Kwaku shows up and the first time he drops the ball, can't you just hear old Dad saying, well, what do you expect? That kid was born on Wednesday. Expectancy, which is set up in the mind, is so critically important. Now, we all might laugh and say, yeah, but Zig, that was in the Ashanti tribe in Africa, thousands of miles away. Let me tell you something interesting about America. Did you know? According to Wendell Johnson in his book, People in Quandaries, that in America there's not a single full-blooded Indian on a reservation who stutters. That's right. Now here's another interesting little thing. In the Indian languages and dialects, there is not a word, nor is there a substitute word for stutter. And if there's not a word for stutter, how you gonna stutter? You kind of snicker a little bit and you say, well, that's kind of cute, Ziglar, but what's that dude trying to tell me? Here's what I'm trying to tell you. Words paint pictures. Then the mind goes to work to complete the picture. Now, that's the reason the words you use, the language you use are so important, because of those pictures. For example, think of the picture that's painted in the mind of a child when the parent calls him stupid. Do you really think that makes them any smarter? Or does it have exactly the opposite effect? You're absolutely right. Bill Glass, good friend of mine. Bill is the former All-Pro end for the Cleveland Browns. And Bill does a lot of work in the prisons in America today. And he says that over 90% of the men and women who are incarcerated in our prisons today were repeatedly told by their parents, one of these days, you are going to end up in jail. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thousands of years ago, the Bible said, as ye sow, so also shall you reap. Then the computer people came along in modern times and made it 100% negative. Garbage in, garbage out. Well, our seminar is a positive one, and so what I want to say to you is the same truth, and that is if you put the good stuff in, you're going to get the good stuff out. To me, that's exciting. You are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. You can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. I will say some things a number of times today because repetition is the mother of learning and it is the father of action, making it the architect of accomplishment. I just love what Dr. Tony Campola of Eastern College in Pennsylvania says. Dr. Campola says, and I'm absolutely in agreement with him, Dr. Campola says over and over that your past is important because it has brought you to where you are. But as important as your past is, as it relates to your present, it is not nearly as important as the way you see your future. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the way you see your future determines your thinking today. Your thinking today determines your performance today. And your performance today determines your future. But hey, did you hear what else Dr. Campola said? Dr. Campola said, look, I understand about your past. I understand that you've had a bankruptcy. I understand that you've had a failed marriage. I understand that you've been chemically dependent. I understand that you were abused as a child. I understand all of those things. But let me say it over and over and over. That is in the past. And I want to say this a number of times. Failure is an event. It is not a person. Think of all of the times that Babe Ruth struck out. Think of all the incomplete passes that Roger Staubach threw. Think of all the sales that a super salesperson has missed, whether they live here in Salt Lake or Portland or Kansas City or Yazoo City. We've missed a lot of sales. So what? Failure is an event. It is not a person. In my own life, I was stone broke at age 45. My dad died when I was 5 years old. It was the heart of the Depression. I'd worked hard all of my life. I had been selling on the streets since I was 8 years old. I was milking cows by the time I was 8 years old. We survived only because we had a mother with an enormous amount of faith and the capacity for a lot of hard work and an enormous amount of wisdom. I was milking those cows at age 8, and I know we got some city slickers watching this, so let me tell you something about cows. They don't give milk. I mean, you got to fight for every drop. Now, I don't know what you can do with that information, but that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to give you information, then you use it as you see fit. Let me tell you what my good friend John Maxwell from San Diego, California says. John Maxwell says, and again I believe he's right, that if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Everything I do as an individual and everything we do as a company and everything this Satellite Network Associates is designed to do is to give you hope in that future. But at the same time, I've got to be absolutely candid with you and say to you that if you expect to win, you've got to understand the second principle that I will be espousing repeatedly today. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that life is tough. I don't know what your experience with it has been. I don't know what you've discovered as you've gone about in the game of life. But I want you to clearly understand that life is tough. I want you to hear it over and over that whether you're a student in school, a salesperson, a household executive, whether you're in the military, the government, or whatever you do, life is tough. But even more significantly, I want you to clearly understand that when you're tough on yourself, life is going to be infinitely easier on you. I just want you to understand that you got to be before you can do, and you got to do before you can have. Now, the reason I emphasize that is this. The average 20-year-old American has witnessed 1 million television commercials. That's 50,000 a year. That's 1,000 a week. And those commercials, primarily 30 to 60 second ones, repeatedly say, you know, everything has a 30-second or a 60-second solution, but that's not what life is all about. The songs of today frequently sing, I want to be free. But folks, let me tell you something. You take the train off the tracks, it's absolutely free, but it cannot go anywhere. You take the steering wheel out of the automobile, it's under the direction and control of no one, but it can't go anywhere. Unless we take control, unless we set the direction in our life, then, ladies and gentlemen, if we do go anywhere, it's under the direction of someone else. This seminar primarily is going to share with you some thoughts as to how you can move to the top. But you got to understand, again, you got to be before you can do, and you got to do before you can have. Life is tough. But I'll say it again, when you're tough on yourself, life is going to be infinitely easier on you. A lot of people are startled when I give them this next little bit of data. 175, according to USA Today, of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies were former United States Marines. 6 of the last 7 presidents of the United States served in the Navy. 26 of the presidents of the United States served in the military. Now, I want you to think with me for a moment. What is it that they teach in the military? Isn't it discipline, ladies and gentlemen? Don't they also teach responsibility? Don't they also teach leadership? See, a lot of people have seen some of those Paris Island boot camp scenes with a brutal drill sergeant, and they've gotten some incredibly erroneous ideas. But I can tell you, because of the things we do with the military, that is absolutely incorrect. In the military, they change their stations at least every 3 years. Now, in wartime, they change them far more often than that. As a matter of fact, sometimes almost immediately. And in the military, what that commander has to do, he has to integrate those people into the flow of the current base or operation. He has to inspire, instruct, train, and you name it. In order for that military commander to move up, he's got to have the ability to teach, train, develop, inspire, enthuse people under him. Now think about it. That's exactly what you've got to do in your life, almost regardless of what your job is. You got to be before you can do. You got to do before you can have. Now, folks, if you haven't figured me out yet, let me go ahead and fess up. I speak and write at the 7th grade third month level. Now, the reason I do that is by accident a few years ago, I discovered that if you kept it at that level, that even the college professors would be able to follow right along with you and understand what you are saying. And I just happen to believe they are people too. But as my good friend, Dr. Steve Franklin from Emory University, the college professor who gave me this little bit, had to say, you know, Zig, the great truths in life are the simple truths. He said, you don't need 3 moving parts and 4 syllables for something to be significant. Think about it for a moment, Zig. There are only 3 pure colors on the face of this earth. But look at what Michelangelo did with those 3 colors. There are only 10 digits, but look at what Einstein did with them. There are only 7 notes, but look what Chopin and Beethoven and Vivaldi did with those 7 notes. Look at what Elvis did with 2. I mean, it just really doesn't have to be that complicated. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, as you well know, delivered right after the Battle of Gettysburg, which took place during the War of Northern Aggression. Just depends on which history book you read, folks. It really does. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, 262 words. 202 of them were 1 syllable. 1 syllable, simple and direct is what I'm talking about. Let me say it again, ladies and gentlemen, life is tough. But when you're tough on yourself and keep it simple so that we can clearly understand it, then life can be enormously rewarding, tremendously exciting, but it's not necessarily going to be easy. You remember earlier, I said that for 24 years of my adult life, I weighed well over 200 pounds. 17 years ago, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I got on a diet and exercise program. Up until then, my idea of exercise simply was to fill the tub, take a bath, pull the plug, and fight the current. I mean, you know, that was it. And any way you cut it, that's just not much of an exercise program. During the next 10 months, not only did I learn to hate jogging, but the truth is I learned to hate joggers. Now, I don't know what your experience with joggers have been, but let me tell you my experience with joggers. Every time I saw one, he's jumping up and down and saying, man, it makes you feel so good. Feel good? I was hurting and hating every step I could possibly take. I mean, I hated it, but I hated even more being sick and tired and not having the energy that I really needed. And so I stayed with it. How clearly I remember, for you good folks up in Portland, Oregon, that magnificent day there on Portland State University campus. It was high noon, had a seminar at 4. I was out there doing my running, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that the ground was flowing smoothly beneath my feet. I was breathing easily. That's the day I changed my vocabulary. Please don't miss this. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't pay the price for good health. You enjoy the benefits of good health. There are those words again. You don't pay the price for a good marriage. You pay the price for a poor marriage. You enjoy the benefits of a good one. You don't pay the price for success. You pay the price for failure. You enjoy the benefits of success. 10 months I hurt. What's the bottom line? The bottom line is, on November the 30th, 1988, I went back to the Cooper Clinic in Dallas, Texas for my physical. While there, I stayed on the treadmill longer than any active player in the National Football League who has taken the test. And many, many, many of them have. I'm 63 years old. I have a resting heart rate of 49. I can outrun 98% of the college kids in America on a 5-mile run. I can do things I never could have dreamed of doing when I was 25 years old. I hurt for 10 months. I've had a ball for the last 17 years. I love to run. I've run with the temperature as much as 40 degrees below zero and the wind just blowing like crazy. Now you understand that is what was happening outside. I mean, surely you don't think for one moment I was out there in that stuff, do you? Don't want to mislead you. Now, what I was doing, I was running inside in a ballroom or up and down a hotel corridor. I was running, though, and that's the point. I finished that little dissertation, and Dr. Cooper's a good friend of mine today, and he kind of grins, you know, and he said, yeah, Zig, that's pretty good. But he said, let me tell you about this 65-year-old lady who lives here in Dallas. Be glad to introduce you to her, Ziglar. She started jogging when she was 59 years old. She just finished her 10th marathon. 2 of them were 50 miles long. I picked myself up off the deck, and he said, oh, yeah, Zig, there's this little 14-year-old girl. She lives right here in Dallas, Zig. She stayed on the treadmill so much longer than you did, I'm not even going to tell you what it was. It would embarrass you if I did. Now, what's the point I'm making? It's a very important, very critical, very simple point. I am not bragging on Zig. I'm not bragging on the 65-year-old lady or the 14-year-old girl. What I am saying is that inside of you, physically and mentally and spiritually, there is an incredible potential just screaming to get out. So important that we understand that. Important that we understand, though, that it's not easy, but that if you discipline yourself to do the things you need to do when you need to do them, the day's going to come when you can do the things you want to do when you want to do them. As you'll notice, as we share in the seminar, I'll be talking about your personal life and your family life and your business life. And the reason I talk about all three is because they're interwoven. You cannot separate them. A lot of times people say, well, Zig, I don't ever take my problems down to work. And ladies and gentlemen, that simply is not true. You might not talk about your problems at work, but believe me, you take those problems to work with you. And they dramatically affect your output, your productivity. The January the 8th, 1990 edition of USA Today points out that managers of small businesses, when surveyed, felt that if there is marital trouble at home, 42% of those managers felt that had a dramatically negative impact on productivity. Only 27% thought that alcohol did, and 22% thought that drugs did. The relationship at home is important. You bet we will be dealing with all issues because success is all-encompassing. Third philosophy that we'll be sharing with you is the basic fact that you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Now, I want to emphasize something. I want to emphasize that what I just said is a philosophy. It is not a tactic. If you think for one moment you can do something for someone, something nice for someone, and then later they're going to do something nice for you, that is manipulative, and that absolutely will not work. Now the question is, what is it that people want in life? What is total success? Well, I have an absolute conviction that all of us want exactly the same things, and there basically are 7 of those things. I believe everybody wants to be happy. Thus far, I've never met a living, breathing human being who said, no, I want to be miserable. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to be healthy. Everybody wants to be at least reasonably prosperous. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of you folks who are hearing me today would like to be unreasonably prosperous. I get so amused at people who say, well, I'm not really interested in money. I think anybody who'd say a thing like that would lie about other things too. I really do. And don't misunderstand, money is not everything. I mean, there's stocks and bonds and real estate, you know, and what have you. Sometimes I have some of my quote, religious friends say to me, well, Ziglar, you're not supposed to be talking about money. Well, let me tell you something, folks. I've had money, and I haven't had money. it's better to have it. I can just tell you, it's better to have it. And let me remind you that the Good Samaritan never could have put that old boy up at the inn after he had been mugged if he hadn't gotten out there and earned himself some money before he could do it, okay? Everybody wants to be secure. Everybody wants to have friends. Everybody wants to have peace of mind. And everybody wants to have good family relationships. Now, what I'd like to do is I would like to just go back and touch on one of those, and that is everybody wants to be happy. Today, a lot of people confuse happiness and pleasure. I believe in pleasure too. Let me give you an example. I love desserts. I could eat good ice cream 3 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I could actually do that and then eat something in between meals. That would give me much pleasure. But the question is, how happy would I be at 486 pounds? See what I'm getting at? Another simple example. I've never tried crack cocaine or cocaine, never will. But scientifically speaking, let me tell you, a lot of people take it because they, quote, want to be happy. The interesting tragedy is this. If you take cocaine long enough, and for some people that's one time, it destroys the brain's capacity to reproduce dopamine and norepinephrine. And without those two chemicals in your body, which your brain naturally produces, without those two chemicals in your body, it is impossible to experience joy and happiness. Isn't that ironical? You take it to be happy, and then that destroys all chance of happiness. Ask yourself 3 basic questions every time you get ready to indulge in pleasure. Now, like I say, I believe in pleasure. As a matter of fact, I believe that if you don't have some pleasures, you can't be happy. But distinguish the important things. 3 questions. Number 1, can I repeat this pleasure indefinitely and be happy? Number 2, now this one's kind of sneaky. Would I be willing for my mama to know I did it? Now, you know, when you answer that one, ladies and gentlemen, that'll keep you from doing a lot of things that get folks in trouble. And number 3, will this pleasure bring misery to someone else? It's just a fact of life. You cannot be happy on somebody else's misery. A couple of years ago, I had a young man in my office. I don't have a chance to do this very often, but his friend was concerned deeply about him because he literally was losing his family and was destroying his health in the process. And so he wanted me to see if I could persuade the young man about something important. So I talked to the young man, and in our conversation, he verified the fact that these are the things that he wanted. He wanted to be happy, wanted to be healthy, wanted to be at least reasonably prosperous and secure and have friends and peace of mind and a good family relationship. I said, in other words, if you had all of those, you'd consider yourself to be successful. He said, yes. Well, I knew that he had been modeling his life after a friend of his who was his boss, who had been enormously successful in his business. And so I asked him why he modeled his life after this young man. Incidentally, the guy in my office was 22. His hero was 27. I asked why he admired him so much. He said, well, he's just so successful. So after we defined success, then I asked him the question. I said, tell me, how happy is your friend? And he looked at me and he said, well, I can't say for sure. I can tell you he has ulcers. Well, I said, you know, you get ulcers not because of what you eat, but because of what's eating you. So that would indicate that he is really not very happy, wouldn't he? He said, yeah, it sure would. I said, well, let's go ahead and give him a failing grade on happiness. Now, since his health is being destroyed there with those ulcers, I said, that indicates he's not very healthy, doesn't he? He said, yeah. I said, well, that also tells us that he really doesn't have peace of mind, doesn't it? He said, yeah. I said, well, let's give him a failing grade on that. Then I pointed out to the young man, I asked him one question, we get 3 failing grades because of it. I said, tell me about his prosperity. And he said, well, he's doing extremely well. I said, okay, let's give him on that one a plus mark. He said, okay. I said, tell me about his security. How financially secure is he? And he said, well, far as I know, he's very secure. And I said, well, interestingly enough, we just had 2 billionaire brothers here in Dallas to declare for bankruptcy. Does he compare to them? He said, no way. I said, we had another man worth $500 million. He just declared for bankruptcy. Does he compare that? He said, oh, no. I said, okay, we had another one worth $100 million. And these literally all came right together. I said, how does he compare with that? And he said, well, he doesn't compare with that very favorably. I said, in other words, we would have to put a question mark after whether or not he was secure. And he said, yeah, we would. I said, tell me about his friends. And he said, well, he doesn't have any except me, and I'm not really his friend. I just happen to admire him. I said, okay, we're going to give him a failing grade on that one then. Then tell me about his family. And he said, well, his wife's divorcing him. Well, I said, we got to give him a failing grade on that one then, don't we? He said, yeah, we do. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Of the 7 things you want in life, your hero flunked out on 5 of them and's got a question mark after another. And I asked him this question, and I want to ask every person who ever will see this, whether it's today or 10 years from today, I want to ask you the same question. Would you swap places with this guy? You see, ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to swap places with him. Did a study, the May 1989 issue of Psychology Today did a study, or reported on a study, of 1,139 CEOs of the Fortune 2000 companies. Average income, $356,000. 90% of them exercise regularly. Most of them can tell you their cholesterol level. Less than 10% of them smoke, and their number 1 priority is their family. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying that when you go for standard of living first, that doesn't necessarily mean your quality of life is going to improve. But I can tell you, based on my own life and based on the lives of literally thousands of other people whom I've read and studied, if you go for quality of life first, standard of living is invariably going to go up. Tom Peters in his book points out simply this basic fact. He says that there's companies that only have financial goals do not make as much money as do those companies which have balanced goals, including social goals. Now I'm going to do something kind of unusual. I'm going to stick my neck out right at this point by making a flat statement. Now, if you're here in Salt Lake City and you agree with it, I want you to hold your hand up. If you're in Portland, Oregon and agree with it, hold your hand up. And if you're in Kansas City, Missouri and agree with it, hold your hand up. Please don't hold your hand up just to be agreeable. But if you really feel it, then please hold the hand up. At this moment, because of the input in your mind, and because of the fact that something happens to you internally, which I'll explain in a moment, at this instant you are literally physiologically energized more than you were when you sat down. Not just psychologically energized, you are physiologically energized. Now, if that is a true statement for you, would you hold your hands up right at this moment, please? All right. You'll notice the hands are up all over the place. Now let me tell you what happens. According to the scientists, when you hear success delivered and concepts delivered that make sense, and they're delivered in a motivating, enthusiastic manner, then it literally activates the pituitary glands, it floods the system with endorphins, and you literally are physiologically energized. You want to read more details? The May 1989 issue of Meetings and Conventions will give you all the details of the study. It's fascinating. In other words, when you're feeling a little down physically, motivation literally will give you a lift. Now, I'm going to get you involved in one of the most exciting projects that you can imagine. What I would like for you to do, and before I ask you to do this, I want to ask a question here, and I wanted to answer it also in Portland and Kansas City with a show of hands. Those of you who have something to do with employment in your company, would you hold up your hands, please? Just stick up your hand if you're an employer making decisions along those lines, okay? Now, those of you who have to answer to the employer, would you hold up your hands, please? Okay, here's what I want to do. I want you employers to imagine that you've got an immediate opening in your company. And what you want to do is you want to find the dream person to fill the opening. You've just heard a computerized service that will enable you to locate this dream person. You can literally get on that computer and program in every desirable quality that you want that employee to have. So employers, start thinking about the dream employee. And for you employees, I want you to think like this. Imagine, if you will, that when you go to work tomorrow, they will ask you or say to you, we now have got a new boss, or your boss has just been promoted, and we want you to choose your new supervisor boss. We want you to come up with every quality you want this supervisor boss to have. So with that in mind, I want you here in Salt Lake City, I want those of you in Portland, I want those of you in Kansas City to start thinking about those dream qualities. And as you call out those qualities, we are going to program them in so we can get a composite of what that dream employee looks like. Now, I want you also to keep this in mind. You must take notes as you do this. You must take the notes. Now, what I want you to do, starting right here in Salt Lake City, I want you to call the qualities out loud so that we will be able to draw a picture of this dream employee, this dream employer. That's what I want you to do, okay? What's the first dream quality that you think about? Integrity. That is number one here in Salt Lake City. All right, give me another one. Loyalty. Okay, you want somebody who's loyal. Give me another one. Dependability. All right, put that one down. Positive mental attitude. We've got, I believe that's integrity, dependable, loyalty, and a positive mental attitude. We need two more right here in Salt Lake. Somebody who is honest, absolutely. Number 5 was honesty. Number 6. Fair. Somebody who is fair. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go up to Portland, Oregon. Let's hear it loud and clear in Portland. What's one of the qualities we're going to need from you?
Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic. Okay, boy, that is so important. Number 2.
Interested.
Somebody who is interested in what they are doing. Interested in you as a person. Number 3.
Good judgment.
Somebody with judgment. Okay, good old common horse sense, which is nothing but good, stable knowledge, is it? Ran that one past some of you, but that's okay. Okay. Now we got judgment. Give me another one.
Hardworking.
Somebody who's hardworking. Oh, is that important? You know, a lot of people quit looking for work as soon as they find a job. And you can't be like this old boy down home. Somebody asked him how long he'd been working for his company, and he said, ever since they threatened to fire me. So that's not the one you want. Okay, need 2 more from up in Portland. What are they?
Motivated.
Somebody who is motivated. Absolutely. 1 more from Portland.
Self-directed.
Somebody with direction or goals. Absolutely. And now, Kansas City, you can already see we got a bunch of good ones, but there are a bunch of good ones left. What's number 1 from Kansas City?
Compassionate.
Somebody with compassion. Absolutely. You got to have that feeling for the other person. What's the next one?
Goal setter.
Somebody who is a goal setter. Okay. And what is the next one?
Humility.
Somebody who is humble. Absolutely. That is so important. Humility. Give me another one.
Admirable.
Somebody who is admirable. All right. We're getting some magnificent ones. Need 2 more from Kansas City.
Sincere.
Somebody who is fair. Okay, we've already got fair. Can you give me another one?
Sincere.
Somebody, I'm sorry?
Sincere.
Somebody who is sincere. Absolutely. Give me another one. Are we back to Salt Lake City now, or do we need one more from Kansas City? Need one more from Kansas City. Hello, Kansas City. Got another one for me? Okay, fantastic. Good self-image. That one always is so important. Now we're back here in Salt Lake City. What's another one here in Salt? Just call her out. Somebody who is competent. Okay, let's put that one down. Somebody who loves people. Okay, give me another one. Somebody with a sense of humor. Okay, you got, hey, we're sure getting some good one. Loves people and a sense of humor. Just put humor there. Give me another one. Somebody who is prompt. We can write that a little easier than we can punctuality. Somebody who is there. Okay, give me another one. Somebody who is creative. Okay, now we're going back to Portland, Oregon, and we need some more for you up there. What you got?
Good communicator.
Somebody who is a communicator. Absolutely. You got to have that. A lot of people think when you take turns talking, that's communication, and that simply is not necessarily so. Need another one out of Portland.
Someone who knows how to learn.
Somebody with an open mind, a learner, somebody who's teachable. You know, some people are so narrow-minded they can look through a keyhole with both eyes at the same time. And have you noticed this? It doesn't figure, but it just happens. A narrow mind and a fat head invariably seem to come on the same person. Now, that doesn't make no sense, but it seems to work out that way. Okay, we need now 3 from Kansas City.
Caring.
Somebody who is what now?
Caring.
Somebody who is caring. Absolutely. Now, we need just 2 more. 2 more from Kansas City. Somebody?
Ethical.
Ethical, absolutely. You got her. Give me one more from Kansas City.
Long suffering.
Long serving. Somebody, well, let's use the word patience. That, I believe, is a little easier to write up there. Now, I believe now they've got long suffering. They're going to be able to program that in. Now, let me take a count on that. That's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. That is 28 magnificent qualities. Let me ask you folks a question. How many of you believe that anybody with those qualities right there would make a magnificent employee at the place you're working right now? Can I see your hand? How many of you believe they'd make a magnificent boss? How many of you believe that anybody with those qualities could get a job anywhere at any time under any circumstances and be successful in that job? Can I see your hand? Okay. How many of you would just love to have a mate with all of those qualities? How many of you would love to have kids with all of those qualities? All right. How many of you would love to have all of those qualities? All right. How many of you believe that if you had all of those qualities, you could take the job you've got right now doing exactly what you're doing and move right up to the top in that job? Can I see your hand? If you had all of those qualities right there. How many of you believe that if you had all of those qualities that you could get all of those things that we want? Happy, healthy, prosperous, you know, the whole bit. How many of you believe you could get all of those things if you had all of those qualities? Okay. Now, here's the question. What are those qualities? That's the question. Are they attitudes or are they skills? I want us to go back down the list, and I'm going to call out the quality, and I want you to simply say attitude or skill. Now, some of them might be both, so if they are, don't let one person snooker you out of it. You still say what you think it is. Starting at the top, integrity. Is that an attitude or a skill? Attitude. Okay. Now, integrity is an attitude. Dependable. Come on, need to hear from you. Attitude. Honesty. Enthusiastic. Judgment. Some say attitude, some say skill. How many of you think it might be a gift? Okay. We'll just give that one all 3 of them. We'll give that one the gas, okay? Motivated. Is that attitude or skill? Attitude. And compassionate. Humility. Sincere, competent, skill, all right? Sense of humor? Somebody who's creative? And attitude. How many of you think it might be a gift too? Well, we'll just give that one the gas too. Somebody who's open-minded, attitude or skill? Attitude. Ethical. Somebody who is loyal. Positive mental attitude. Attitude. Okay. Hey, somebody who's fair. Somebody has said attitude, some said skill. We've put them both. Somebody who's interested. Attitude and hard-working. Some say attitude, some say skill. Somebody who's self-directed. And some say skill, some say attitude. We'll put them both. Somebody who's a goal setter. Skill, okay. Somebody who's admirable. Come on, need to hear from you. Attitude. Somebody with a good self-image. Somebody who loves people. Somebody who's prompt. Somebody said skill. They live across the street and we're running late. Okay, that's generally the way it happens. Somebody who's a good communicator. Somebody who is caring. Attitude. And somebody who is long-suffering. Somebody said give, some said attitude, and some said skill. Okay, out of the 28, let's see what we've got. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 of the 28 are straight attitudes. And let me see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the additional ones, which also involve attitude. 24 of the 28 involve our attitude. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you believe, based on what you just said, that your attitude is pretty important? Can I see your hands, please? Okay, there's no doubt about it. How many of you believe that if we taught these qualities in our schools, that we would have an even better America? Can I see your hand? How many of you believe that this would be a strong step towards solving our drug problem today? You think about it. Can you imagine a youngster or an oldster getting involved in drugs and crime and promiscuity if they had these qualities going for them? I absolutely cannot imagine it. How many of you, and I'd like to see your hands, I can only see at the moment in Salt Lake City, but how many of you believe that these qualities should be taught in our public school system? Can I see your hands? Okay. How many of you in these qualities, how many of you were taught a course in school which taught you how to develop these qualities? Can I see your hands, please? Well, I'm looking over the audience, and thus far I do not see a single hand. Got one over here that went up. Got a couple more over here. Have 3 if I've counted correctly. Got 4 back in the back. 5. Don't be so bashful, folks. Are there any other? We want to make certain we don't bring you an incorrect report. Okay? 5 out of this crowd. How many of you believe, therefore, that we basically are just flat missing the boat in education? Can I see your hands, please? Now, with the exception of the educators who see this, everybody else really ought to feel pretty good about it, shouldn't they? But educators don't feel good at the moment, but everybody else ought to feel real good. You see, we've identified what success is. We have identified what it takes to be successful. We agree that if we had these qualities, we could really be there. And we have found out the culprit in our country. It's those educators. Isn't it wonderful, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to point the finger of blame at somebody else and say, it's your fault, it's her fault, it's his fault? Isn't that marvelous? All the time I thought it was my fault, and now I realize it's somebody else's fault. But folks, here's a basic problem. When you got one finger pointed that way, there are exactly 3 times that many fingers pointed right back this way. Now, let me ask you a question. In the area where you live, how many hours a day do the kids go to school? In the area where you live, how many hours a day do the kids go to school? Somebody, would you speak up, please? 6, somebody said 7, somebody said 5. Would you be willing to concentrate, or would you be willing to compromise rather and say 6 hours a day? Would that be a fair average? Okay, 6 hours a day the kids go to school. How many days a year do they go to school? 180. Okay, that means simply that the kids are in school 1,080 hours a year. Now, in the area you live, how many hours are there in the year? Okay, very good. Same as in Texas. That is 8,760. And what that means basically is this. The kids are in school 1,080 hours a year. They are at home 7,680 hours a year. And mom and dad had those kids 40,000 hours before the teacher ever saw them. Now, how many of you believe, considering that mom and dad should assume some of the responsibility for teaching those marvelous qualities of success? Can I see your hands, please? Okay. How many of you believe that mom and dad should acquire some of these qualities before they start teaching them? Can I see your hand? As a matter of fact, what do you call a person who practices one thing and preaches another? Hypocrite. And you know what a hypocrite is? That's just a fellow who simply is not himself on Sunday. Okay? We can understand that, all right? How many of you believe we'd really have something in America if we taught these at home initially and then reinforced them in school? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now, a lot of people say, but wait a minute, Zig, those are values, and you can't teach values in school. My friend, that is all we really teach. We teach values, everything in every way about life. We teach them. We really do. Let me ask you a question. Whose values are these? Who gave me the words? You did, okay. Whose values are they? Whose kids are they? Okay, whose schools are they? Now think about it. Can you think of any reason why you should not be teaching your kids your values in your schools? Let me tell you a fact of life. I've been beating the bushes for 43 years. Not once in my 63 years. Not once in my entire lifetime have I ever had an employer say to me, well, Zig, I really appreciate you sending that young lady to me for an interview. But Zig, we couldn't use anybody like her in our company. Well, you realize she has integrity, is completely dependable, is absolutely honest, is tremendously enthusiastic, has tremendous judgment, is highly motivated. No, Zig, we couldn't use anybody like that. You know what they've told me 10,000 times? You send me somebody with those basic qualities, and I'll teach them how to run the gizmo that manufactures the widgets. Send me those qualities, and I'll teach them the other. Now, I want to emphasize a point. That's the place you start, folks. When you have those qualities, amazing things happen. Now, if you want to be a physician, you still got to go to medical school and learn medicine. If you want to be a dentist, you still got to go to dental school. If you want to be an accountant, you still got to study that. But what we've discovered is this. Anybody who has these basic foundational qualities can learn and do learn the other things far more easily and quickly, and they become better at it. Now, here's a question. I keep using a specific word. I keep saying teach, teach, teach. Can you actually teach this kind of thing? How many of you believe you can teach integrity? Can I see your hands? How many of you believe that you can teach dependability? How many of you believe you can teach honesty? How many of you believe you can teach enthusiasm? If you will go down the list, you will discover that of the 28 qualities that you have identified, ladies and gentlemen, 28 of those qualities can be taught. Don't miss this. Because if we clearly communicate this, it can have a dramatic impact in your life. If they can be taught their skills, if they can be taught their skills. And let me tell you why I get so tremendously excited about that. That tells me I got a chance in life. That tells me that my children and my grandchildren have a chance in life. That tells me that you and your children and your grandchildren have got a chance in life, because if they can be taught, then, my friend, you can learn those skills. That tells me that that youngster who left the slums this morning without a bite of food to eat, and literally almost with a kick in the rear, has never had a word of encouragement. That tells me that if that youngster is fortunate enough to encounter a Jaime Escalante, stand and deliver. If you didn't see it when it was on television, you have a responsibility and a tremendous opportunity to go to the video store and pick up a copy. It's a story that takes place in the barrio in Los Angeles, a Mexican community. The kids there are high on drugs. Teenage pregnancy is literally running rampant all over the place. And here they have so many dropouts. And the kids who graduate from high school don't really have an education. There's little hope. And then along comes Jaime Escalante, a businessman. And he looks at those kids and he said, those kids can learn if somebody will love them enough to discipline them enough to require that they learn. A Gallup poll revealed that 90% of our graduating seniors wish that their parents and their teachers loved them enough to discipline them to do the things they need to do and expected them to do more. Jaime Escalante knew he could teach those kids, and he knew those kids could learn. He introduced a foreign subject to their thinking. It was advanced calculus. Man, they couldn't multiply 40 times 40 in a lot of cases. And here comes a guy coming in, advanced calculus. The school board and others fought him. He persisted. Bottom line is this. 18 of his kids, second year he was there, 18 of those kids won college scholarships by passing an exam in advanced calculus that is so difficult that less than 2% of the high school seniors in America will even take the test. And 7 years later, 85% of those kids are professionals. Let me say it again. Failure is an event. It is not a person. You are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. You can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. I want to say also, as strongly as I possibly can, that you, yes you, and this is the thing, ladies and gentlemen, that gets me so excited about what I do. Earlier you have said that anybody with those qualities could be enormously successful. You've said anybody with those qualities could take the job you've got and go right to the top. I'm going to tell you without any fear of error. I can look you straight in the eye, and yes, I do mean you, and I do mean I'm looking you right in the eye, and I can tell you that you already have every single quality that you have identified right there. Every one of them. Are you going to sit there and tell me, no you don't, you have no integrity, nobody can count on you? As far as being honest, forget it. Well, I'm so crooked that when I die, they're going to have to screw me in the ground? Are you going to sit there and say, hard work, man, I'm so lazy I wouldn't hit a lick at a snake? You have got, my friend, some of every one of these qualities. Now, you are pitifully, woefully short in many of them, as are all of us. But let me say it again. You're what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. You can change what you are. You can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. You might have a little argument there and say, but Zig, me? Man, if I had all of those qualities, I would be doing so many things. I wouldn't be sitting here listening to you. I'd already have it made, man. Not necessarily. Year's 1901, down in Beaumont, Texas. A man has having to sell part of his property to feed his family. There's a depression on. There is a drought on. An oil company came to him one day and said, "Sir, we believe there might be oil on your property. Let us drill for it. And if we discover any oil, we will pay you royalties on every single barrel that is pumped out." Well, the man had absolutely nothing to lose. He had a tremendous amount to gain. So he said, "Let's do it." Well, in those days, the derricks were made out of wood. And when they brought in a gusher, it literally destroyed the derrick. And the greater the destruction, the greater the excitement, because that indicated an enormous amount of oil underneath. When this oil well came in, it came in with such force that it literally destroyed the derrick, blew it into 1,000 pieces, and for the next 11 days, in excess of 100,000 barrels of oil per day were pumped out of that oil well. Most productive oil well in history. That was Spindletop. The man became an instant multi-millionaire. Or did he? You see, the reality is this. He had been a multi-millionaire ever since he had acquired the property. But until they discovered the oil and brought it to the surface and took it to the marketplace and cashed it in, it literally had no value. My friend, please hear this. You see, the reality is you have some of all of these qualities. I can say that again without any fear of error. But I also will say this to you, that until and unless you recognize and accept that fact, then there's not going to be the use of those qualities that will enable you to be the complete success you are capable of being. There's a beautiful lady. She lives in Dallas, Texas. She has an IQ of 141. When she was a teenager, she was literally a traffic stopper. She'll still slow traffic down, incidentally, quite a bit. She's an outstanding conversationalist. She can talk with you in great depth about a dozen different subjects. But until a few years ago, had you asked her to describe herself to you, she would have said, "I am fat, dumb, and ugly." Ladies and gentlemen, we got to be honest, and one of the things that is so exciting is that before this seminar is over, I'll be sharing with you specifically how you can begin to develop the qualities you've already got, because it would be a tragedy beyond belief to have the very foundation that would enable you to be enormously successful and never literally use what you have got. You see, if you had $1 million in your checking account, you would never write a check on it if you did not know it was there. But the moment you discovered its presence, then at that precise moment there would be a boom in the local economy. I want to add in one other thing at this point, because I want to emphasize that I think it is so important. I'll tell you again, folks, life is tough. But when you're tough on yourself, life is going to be infinitely easier on you. Several years ago, I was speaking down in San Antonio. During one of the breaks, a lady came up to me. She had a question. She wanted to ask it. But she didn't want to look me in the eye in order to ask the question. So she lowered her head looking at the floor, and she said, "Mr. Ziglar," she said, "you kind of make a nice little old fee when you make them little old speeches you make. Now, don't you?" And she looked up, grinning so wide she could have eaten a banana sideways. I mean, she was grinning. Now, I looked at her and I said, "Now, ma'am, I don't have any idea where you heard that. Have no idea where you got the message. But it's absolutely incorrect. It is a vicious rumor, and I don't want that to ever spread out of this room. I want to stop it right here. I said, the truth is, I really make a great big old fee for them little old speeches I make. But you know what I didn't tell her, folks? I didn't tell her the number of times that I've spoken to the Lions and the JCs and the Rotaries for no fee. I didn't tell her the number of times I've gotten up early enough to go down and speak to the men who delivered the bread and cakes and pies to the restaurants and to the stores and to the outlets that are retailing those products 3-4 hours before you even turned over. I didn't tell the number of times I've been into schools and prisons and halfway houses and drug rehab centers, the number of times I have spoken to vacuum cleaner and cookware and real estate and life insurance companies, the number of times I've driven 50 miles, 100 miles, 200 miles on 3 different occasions to speak to a dozen people free, and then have to drive back that night, my expense, because I did not have enough money to pay the motel bill. But I did those things because I honestly believed I had something to say. I did those things because I knew in my own heart and mind that if I were ever going to be paid for saying what I had to say, that I not only had to say something that had value, but I had to say it in a way that they would be able to accept the message. And I did it because, as my good friend Steve Brown from Atlanta, Georgia says, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can learn to do it well. Now think about that. If we could all take 3 lessons from the pro at the country club and then be good enough to make the PGA Tour, there'd be thousands and thousands of people on the PGA Tour, and then there'd be nothing in it for anyone. If you could become a super salesperson by taking a weekend course in selling, and then you'd be just absolutely professional, then I can assure all of you salespeople that the rewards would be almost non-existent. If you could become a physician by taking a 3-week course at the university, we'd have millions of physicians, and then there'd be very little compensation and no satisfaction. No, if it's worth doing poorly until you can learn to do it well. Never making the same mistake again, learning from each one, getting better and better, understanding always that failure is an event, it is not a person. Now as I begin to look at my audience, I've come to the conclusion that one of your goals when you sat down was to eventually stand up. So what we're going to now do is we are going to take a 3-minute stand-up break. Thank you. Thank you.
Satellite Network Affiliates presents The Seminar Link with Zig Ziglar on qualities of success.
Welcome back. Did you have a nice break? Yeah. Great. Well, I understand the congratulations in order. We had 7 lucky people win the Zig Ziglar packages during the break in several in each location. Let's give all these people a big hand right now, okay? Congratulations to all of you. That's terrific. Well, I think every one of us here today are winners simply by virtue of the fact that we're taking advantage of this unique opportunity to make our lives more productive and successful. The winners I know don't seem to waste time complaining about what's wrong with their lives. They take action to make their lives better. And that's what we're doing here today. We're all taking action by learning more about the qualities we need to develop and refine in order to become the top performers we truly want to be. Zig has helped thousands of people to succeed, and I'm confident he's adding hundreds more to that today in Salt Lake City, Portland, and Kansas City through this tremendous Seminar Link program. During the next session, Zig's going to give us some more practical tools for successful living. He's also going to teach us how to take control of our circumstances instead of letting our circumstances take control of us. Once again, please welcome the electrifying Zig Ziglar.
Thank you. Basic situation is this. Right now you feel good. There is no way you could feel anything but good. But what we want to look at is what can we do to make certain we feel good next week, next month, next year. In other words, how can we keep it going? How can we be up most of the time and on when we need to? Now I'm going to put a lot of emphasis in this session along the lines of the fact that you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. And what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to work with a formula. We're going to give you some steps and procedures which absolutely will make a permanent difference in your life. I would like to remind you that we touched on the first step in our last session when I said to you the first thing you want to do is you want to claim these qualities of life. You want to simply adopt them as being yours. You want to do everything you can on a steady basis to develop those qualities further and further and further. Step number 2, if you want to be up most of the time and on when you need to be, if you want to build that winning attitude, then you need to be a good finder. I'm going to stray from what a lot of people believe is the norm in life, the old look out for me first, and then if there's anything left, you can have it approach to life. As I indicated earlier, we teach a seminar in Dallas called Born to Win. People do come from everywhere. A couple of years ago, we had a major corporation to send in 4 couples. Now, we encourage people to come with their mates if they are married. But it is not a marriage seminar, though we've seen a lot of husbands and wives walk in at each other's throats and walk out in each other's arms because we did fit them with those new glasses, because we did teach them how to communicate. Again, a lot of people really do think that when they take turns talking, that's communication, and that really is not. Well, in this 3 days, I lecture twice a day, but most of the time is spent around a round table with 6 other people. There's a lot of individual instruction. There's a great deal of individual participation. Somebody has rightly said that if you hear it, you forget it. If you see it, you remember it. But if you see it and hear it and do it, you understand, and then you're successful. That's the reason we like to get you involved. It's the doing that makes the difference. Again, you got to be before you can do. You got to do before you can have. Well, these 4 couples came to our Born to Win seminar, and we had them really involved. When we have these people around those round tables, every time anybody says anything or does anything, the other 6 people write them a little note, and it says, "I like Jane Jones because." And then they give some specific observable behavior. Because she is so pleasant and gives me encouragement. At work, you could say something like, I like Bill Smith because he brings his projects in on time and under budget. But at the seminar, at the end of it, each person there has got between 50 and sometimes as many as 150 of those little slips. And they literally keep them for months, sometimes even years. Well, the first night, these 4 couples went out to a late dinner at one of Dallas's finest and certainly one of our most expensive restaurants. They hit the jackpot with a waiter. I mean, he was absolutely magnificent. He had been there over 20 years, been a waiter over 25 years. He was totally professional in every aspect of his job. He was there when he was needed, but he did not join the party. When there was a need, he filled it and disappeared, and he could anticipate those needs. He really was great. When then they got his name, and when they got ready to leave, they left him a 25% tip, which is significant, I hasten to add. They also left, each one of them did, that is, one of those little "I like because" slips. They walked out the front door. They had gotten about 100 feet, 150 feet from the front door when they heard the waiter's voice from the rear. He was calling to them, "Wait a minute, folks, wait a minute." They looked, and there he was. And as he ran to them, he was waving those 8 slips of paper. He drew a breath and he stopped. He said, "You know, folks, I've been a waiter over 25 years. Then they said he broke down and literally could not say a thing for what seemed like forever. When he finally regained his composure, he said, "In 25 years, this is by far the most significant thing that has ever happened to me." He said, "I will never forget tonight." And with that, he turned and walked back in the restaurant. Never a word about the tip, just about those little 8 slips of paper. My good friend Calvert Robert from Phoenix, Arizona, says there are over 3 billion people on the face of this earth who go to bed hungry every night. But he says there are over 4 billion people on the face of this earth who go to bed hungry every night for a word of praise, an appreciation, of love, of hope, of affection, of encouragement. Wouldn't it be tragic if one of those people was your wife, or your husband, or your mom, or your dad, your son or your daughter, or for that matter, someone with whom you work every day of your life? A nice person, a nice lady, a nice guy, who on the surface seems to have everything going their way, but deep down they're in turmoil. And a word of encouragement, of consideration, of kindness, of affection. What a dramatic difference it could make in their lives, and it would only take a moment. Yes, words of encouragement can make such a dramatic difference in someone's life. 3 years ago, I spoke down in Melbourne, Australia. During one of the breaks, a lady came up to me and she said, "Mr. Ziglar, I'm 32 years old." She said, "I have 2 little girls. They're 6 years old and they're 9 years old. They've had psychological problems like you absolutely cannot believe, including a reversion to infantile behavior." She said, "I got your tapes on raising those positive kids." And she said, "In one of them, you say, tell your kids that you love them." But she said, "Mr. Ziglar, in my 32 years of life, there's never been a living, breathing human being who said to me, 'I love you.' But in your tape, you just kept saying, 'Tell your kids that you love them.'" And she said, as a matter of fact, it was weird because it seemed every time I would put that particular tape in, it was always on that exact spot. If you don't tell your kids that you love them, they're going to grow up and get married and have kids, and they won't tell their kids that they love them, and somebody's got to break the chain. She said, one night we were seated in our den. I was on one side of the room. My 6-year-old was literally at my feet. My 9-year-old was across the room, and all of a sudden she said, "I remembered." And she said, I just more or less blurted it out. "Girls, I just want you to know I sure do love you." She said, had my 6-year-old been on a spring, she could not have gotten up any faster. She was like a shot out of a gun. She threw her arms around me and hugged me and kissed me and started crying. My 9-year-old across the way ran across, and she threw her arms around me and she hugged me and she kissed me and she started crying. And of course by then I was crying too. She said, Mr. Ziglar, I have no idea how long we cried. Might just have been a moment or two, but it might have been 5, even 10 minutes. She said, all I know is that when we finished crying, that those tears had washed away a lot of the hurt and the pain and the bitterness even that had crept into our lives. Though I was emotionally exhausted, there was an exhilaration that is impossible to describe, a feeling that I'd never had before in my life. She said, the girls and I promised each other that night that never again would we let a day go by that we didn't start that day and end that day by hugging and kissing and declaring our love. She said, you know, Mr. Ziglar, you would have thought that under the emotions of the moment, the circumstances that were there, you would have thought that it would have been easy and natural. But you know, when we got away from the emotion of that moment, we started thinking about it, I felt awkward the next morning. She said, I'm just so grateful that I was mature enough to understand that if you always wait until you feel like doing things, you will never really get them done. And so she said, though it was awkward at first, because you cannot make an overdraft on the bank of love all of your life, and then bring that account up to date in one deposit. I don't care how big the deposit is, but the next morning, awkwardly, I grabbed my little girls again. I hugged them and kissed them, told them how much I loved them, and they told me the same thing. Took us a couple of weeks before it even approached being natural. At the end of the month, though, we were adding an occasional hug and kiss extra, and Mr. Ziglar, within 60 days, we just used any excuse for the hugging and kissing. And Mr. Ziglar, within 90 days, 98% of all of those psychological problems had disappeared. 2,000 years ago, a Jewish scholar wrote a love letter to his relatives in Corinth. Some say it's the most beautiful love letter ever written. He kind of summed it up by saying, love never fails. I was interested to note that when you chose those qualities of success, you put loving in there because it is so important. I take you back to the story of the waiter. Now, I got a couple of points I want to make with that story. Well, one of them just kind of cute. At least I think it's cute. Wouldn't you have just loved to have been at the next table that waiter served? Man, don't you know they got service like nobody has ever gotten before in their life. But the real reason I tell the story, the major point I want to make, is the very heart of everything we do. And that simply is this philosophy that you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Why, the next morning when those 8 people came in, and remember now, the waiter said it was the most meaningful event of his entire career, but you should have seen those 8 people the next morning. They were so high we had to pull them down off the ceiling before we could bring them into the room. They bought a case of those little I like because pads because they want to give them to everybody. It really does work. And you know, I can almost, I'm not a mind reader, but I know where some of your thinking is. You might sit there and say, well, Zig, I can see where it would work for that lady in Melbourne, Australia. Those were kids. I can see where it would work with that waiter because, after all, the reality is he got a bigger tip because he did such a job. But, Zig, you got to understand, man, I work on Main Street. I deal with Wall Street. This outfit I work with, man, their bottom line. Can you use this philosophy in the cold-blooded, hard-headed business world in which we live? My friend, it works better there than anywhere else. In the December 1987 issue of Executive Excellence, a publication of 16 pages which has a lot of very concise and pertinent articles in it. There was an article in it by Dr. Ken Blanchard, and Dr. Blanchard was, or is, the man of 1-minute manager fame. And Dr. Blanchard reported on a study which had been done concerning investing in the Dow Jones. And here's what he said. Had you put $30,000 30 years ago in the Dow Jones, right across the board, the composite, he said today you would have in excess of $100,000. But he said, had you taken the same $30,000 and invested it in the 21 companies which have ethics as the base from which they operate, these qualities right here, ethics, the base from which they operate, plus they have an announced public policy that the reason they're in business is to serve the public. You can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. Today you'd have over $1 million. Same article. Same article. He reports on a study done by Arizona State University of the companies which have paid dividends for the last 100 years. Now, folks, that's financial stability if there's ever been financial stability. And these companies have ethics as the base from which they operate and an announced public policy that the reason they're in business is to serve the public. It's absolutely true. You can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. So step number 2, if you really want to keep that attitude right, if you really want to build that career, and if you really want to do the things in life that will make you successful, become a good finder. Now, incidentally, folks, you know, again, I'm not a mind reader, but I know sometimes when people sit there in seminary, you get to thinking, well, I don't know if I want to do all that. Like this idea of standing in front of the mirror and claiming all of those qualities. I'd be a little self-conscious, Ziglar, if I did that. Now, I'll look at them from time to time, but to go through that rigmarole you're talking about, I don't know about that. Friend, let me ask you a question. What have you got to lose? Nobody's even going to know about it but you. But suppose it does what I'm telling you it will do. Wouldn't it be tragic if you chose not to take a simple suggestion that would make a dramatic change in your life? Claim the qualities, number 1. Number 2, become a good finder. Number 3, you need to get an education. One of the things that I do in our company when we bring someone new aboard, at the moment we have about 80 people, and when we bring someone aboard, I like to spend a little time talking with them to let them know what they can expect from us and kind of to find out what we can expect from them. Kind of to get to know that individual. Recently we had a beautiful lady to join us after she had been on vacation for 23 years. Now, those of you who are mothers will say, Ziglar, that wasn't a vacation. Seriously, she had raised her children. Now she was re-entering the workplace, and she was starting back, and you can understand why she would be a little apprehensive. And incidentally, I understand raising kids is not a vacation, and I would never even mildly imply that. But now she's shifting gears, and as she came in, the first question she asked me was, do you discriminate because of a lack of education? And I said, well, we certainly do. She looked a little stunned and obviously disappointed. But I said, we never discriminate because of a lack of schooling. Now, there's a dramatic difference in the two. You see, you can finish school, and I definitely think you should. You can even make it easy, and I definitely think you should not. But you can never finish your education, and it is never easy. It's something that goes on and on and on. I'm absolutely convinced that there's literally no excuse in America today for anybody not to have a brilliant education if you can even read at the 5th grade level. And if you cannot read at the 5th grade level, go to your public library. They can put you in touch with the people who are teaching illiterates how to read in most every case. Once you've gotten turned on to what it can mean to you, I believe you'll do it. There's no excuse for not being brilliantly educated. All you need to do is 3 very simple things. Number 1, you should learn 1 new word every day. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's not an earth-shattering task. Reader's Digest has an article every month or a page in there. It pays to enrich your word power. 1 new word a day. In 5 years, you can talk to just about anybody about just about anything. Not because you know a whole lot of big words, but because they have broadened your base. It's gone broader and deeper. And you see, every time you learn a new word, that word's got a couple of buddies. And those buddies have got buddies. You learn 1 new word a day, and in 5 years, I'll absolutely guarantee you it will make a difference. One study involving 1,361 executives revealed, and these are top-level executives, revealed that they had outstanding vocabularies. Vince Roberts lives in Ottawa, Canada. Now, Vince was 37 years old. He had a 5th grade education. He was a cab driver. And he literally spent hours every week at the airport waiting on a fare. He spent hours every week at the hotels waiting on a fare. And then one day, something happened in Vince Roberts' life. I do not know what it was, but something happened. He became inspired. He realized that he did not have to stay like he was or where he was, so he bought himself a book. The book he bought was a dictionary. A 20-pound dictionary. And starting on page 1, word for word for word, he went all the way through that 20-pound dictionary twice. He ended up owning the cab company. He ended up investing in the stock market, becoming a very wealthy man. Today, he travels telling people how you did it. How he did it. Now, my friend, there is no excuse on earth. There's no reason why you cannot learn at least 1 new word every day, and it absolutely will make a difference. Step number 2, in order to get that education, you need to read at least 20 minutes every day. Now, I spend about 2 hours a day or more. But you got to understand, this is my business, this is my life, this is my profession. I got to do it. Fortunately, I just absolutely love to do it. But 20 minutes a day will make a dramatic difference. Now, obviously, I'm talking about reading something good, powerful, positive, biographies, autobiographies, self-help books, motivational books, books about your business, your profession, the industry of which you are a part, books about human nature, how to deal with people. If you are an average reader, that's 220 words a minute. If you will just read 20 minutes a day, at the end of the year you will have read 20 200-page books. That is 18 more than the average American reads in a year's time. That will give you a colossal advantage in whatever it is that you're doing. And folks, the reality is just a little advantage is all most of us need. It's the little things that make the big difference in life. You call a girl a kitten, she'll absolutely love you. Call her a cat, you got a problem, friend, a bad problem. If you say she's a vision, you score all kind of points. Call her a sight, you're in trouble. Fellas, can you imagine you look in your wife's eyes and say, honey, when I look into your eyes, the wheels of time just stand still. Oh, that's beautiful, that's poetry. But can you imagine what will happen if you look her in the eyes and say, you know, honey, when I look into your eyes, when I look into your eyes, I just am reminded that you got a face that stop a clock. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, that is something that would make a difference. It's the little things that make a big difference. If my watch is 4 hours wrong, no problem. But if it's 4 minutes wrong, I'm in trouble. Because you see, I'm scheduled to leave this afternoon at 3:45. If it's 4 minutes slow and I get there at 3:49, well, you can see the problem. Because I made a deal with the airlines that if I'm not there when they get ready to go, that they're just to go ahead without me. And as far as I know, they've always lived up to their end of the agreement. They did it last year in Dallas, I can say that. Little things make a big difference in life. The third thing you need to do to get that brilliant education is you need to regularly listen to cassettes when you're in your automobile. For example, the average salesman, according to my friend Don Hudson, spends 510 hours a year in his automobile. While you're in that car, and the average person, incidentally, I was a visiting scholar at the University of Southern California for 2 years, and they did a study which revealed that if you live in a metropolitan area and drive 12,000 miles a year, that in 3 years' time, you can acquire the equivalent of 2 years of college education while you're in your automobile. You can literally learn everything from Chinese art and a foreign language to the Bible to financial planning to goal setting to how to close a sale to how to communicate more effectively. There are hundreds of things that you can learn in your automobile. It ought to be the greatest educational institution literally in the world. You spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, even $40,000 in a car. And yet the typical American, let me tell you what they do. They stomp their foot and gripe and groan and complain. Every time the traffic gets a little heavy, they see a jam up front, and they say, daggone it all, when are they going to do something about this? When they see a traffic jam, saying, oh boy, I bet it's going to take me 30 minutes to get through that sucker, and in 30 minutes I can learn 3 new words, I can learn 2 new closes, I can learn about financial planning. That's what I'm talking about. Using the time that you have. You got to go anyhow. Why not get an education while you're on the way? And that won't take 1 minute of your time. Incidentally, folks, when you talk about time, let me remind you that 72% of the time when we're watching television, we're watching something we have no interest in. We rush home to see a particular show, The Cosby Show. Wonderful show. I've already seen it twice. It is a good show. But a lot of times people will mash a button and change a channel and watch on the other one, and 4 hours later they say, boy, I can't believe I spent the whole night here doing nothing. I'm talking about utilizing your time. So step number 3 is get an education. Step number 4, if you really want to go to the top, you want to maintain that attitude, you need to learn how to say hello. You need to know how to greet people properly, whether it's in person or whether it's on the phone. Now, I do something, and have been doing it a long time. Regardless of what time of day it is, when I greet people, I always say, good morning. And whether it's 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, they always respond, in 85% of the cases that is, they'll say, good morning. Now, a lot of times, after they said it, they'll say, it's not morning. And I'll say, why did you say good morning then? They said, I said it because you said it. I said, that's right. That brings out something very important, ladies and gentlemen, and that's this. When you go out in life to find friends, they're very scarce. When you go out to be a friend, they're everywhere. What you send out is what you get back. If you complain because people in a certain area or building were not very friendly, can you honestly say that you initiated in the friendliness yourself? Send it out and you will get it back. Greet people enthusiastically, whether it's in person or on the telephone. Now, I challenge you to do this. When this seminar is over, go get your yellow pages out. Look up 10 numbers. Swap with one of your buddies who's got 10 numbers and dial those 10 numbers, and I'll guarantee you no more than 3 out of the 10 can you identify what the name of that business is. You really cannot. They snatch the phone off the hook as if it were an intrusion. What do you mean dial this number? I wouldn't bother you. Good morning, little company. And you have no more idea than a goat who you have called. I challenge you. Call us in Dallas, 214-233-9191. Got a watch number, but it'll do you more good. Spend your own dollar. Call us down there, and our lady will pick up that telephone, and with considerable enthusiasm, she'll say, good morning. Now, a lot of people say, Ziglar, is it always a good morning? It sure is, and if you don't believe it, you just try missing one of them. Then she makes a little motivational speech. She says, it's a great day at Zig Ziglar's. And this is Shirley, may I help you? There are 11 words involved. It takes 4 to 5 seconds to do that. It will save you an average of 9 seconds because nobody ever says, how'd you say it was? Which company is this? Where are you? They've gotten the communication very clearly. Now, when I'm at home, and I do stress this is when I'm at home, when I answer the telephone, I answer it many times singing, oh, good morning to you. Now, I'll be the first to admit sometimes there's a long pause. A lot of times I'll sing, if you don't speak up, I'm going to hang up. And they'll say, who is this? I'll say, whoever you want. Who do you want? Man, you sure do feel good today. I said, yeah, many years ago, I decided I was going to feel good today. Good friend of mine, before his tragic death, Dr. John Kozak, a brilliant young psychiatrist, told me that over 90% of the way we feel is determined by the decision we make as to how we want to feel and how we expect to feel. There are 51 diseases which are psychosomatic in origin. Answer it with enthusiasm. A lot of times I'll pick up the phone, I'll just say, howdy, howdy, howdy. Now, my favorite way of answering the phone at home, good morning, this is Gene Ziglar's happy husband. I do it for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the truth. And number 2, fellas, you just can't believe how many points I score with that redhead when I answer that telephone that way. And I love to score points with a redhead. Now, when one of my grandchildren are around, I have 2 that are the right age for this. One of them is named Sunshine for obvious reasons. The other one is named Keeper. Now, you know, when a fisherman pulls in a good one, he's got a keeper. And so when we first saw her, we knew we had a keeper, and that's where the name comes from. If one of them are around, I'll pick up the telephone and I'll say, good morning, this is Sunshine's proud granddaddy. Those little eyes just light up and think of what that does to her self-image. One day, Keeper was over at the house. She and I had been talking up in my office. The redhead was down in the den, and then Keeper left me and went downstairs, and I had to ask the redhead something, so I just picked up the phone and dialed her, and Keeper picked up the telephone. She said, good morning, this is Mama's happy granddaughter. I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, these kids really get with the program. They follow the model which is there. And you might say, well, Zig, now, why do you do this? Well, let me tell you something, folks. I do it because, again, you cannot separate your personal life from your family life and from your business life. We were very fortunate early on. We discovered that kids go where there's excitement. They stay where there is love. There's never been a generation in our nation's history that is as starved for affection and intimacy as is this current generation. And they are not getting it, and that is one of the reasons they turn to drugs and promiscuity. The reason they get involved in gangs and some of the vandalism that takes place. We discovered that if their love was there and the excitement was there, that other kids would come play in our den and living room. Our children's friends wanted to, out of curiosity, what kind of people are they up there that answer the telephone that way? So they would come up. Sometimes we had a traffic jam, but I would prefer 14 of those kids in our den and us know everything going on than to have my child somewhere else and have no idea of what was happening. Now, I kind of hit the jackpot again in this. The redhead is affectionately known as the happy hugger. If it's moving, she will stop it and hug it. And if it is not moving, she'll dust it off and sell it. So when these kids would come in, the redhead would grab them and give them that hug. In many cases, that was the only hug they had gotten since the last time they had been there. It creates an amazing environment by answering the phone that way. Parents, I challenge you to do this. If the telephone rings and your daughter is standing or sitting around, Mom, just pick up that telephone and with a big grin on your face and a lot of enthusiasm, say, "Good morning, this is Molly's proud mom." Dad, if you're there and the phone rings, you pick up that telephone and you say, "Good morning, this is Paul's proud pop." And you might have that old gawky, gangly 15-year-old boy standing there, and he might say, "Oh, Dad." But I'll guarantee you, the next time the phone rings, he will wait for you to answer it. It is the ultimate compliment. When one of my grandchildren are over there, they never answer the telephone. They go to the telephone, but they wait for me to answer that telephone. I can tell you it'll do wonders for their self-image. Dad, let me talk to you just for a moment. Dr. Ross Campbell says this. He says the average little 6-year-old boy has only gotten 1/6 as much hugging and kissing as has the average little 6-year-old girl. And in the first grade, little boys get in 9 times as much trouble, or 9 times as likely, rather, to have a speech difficulty as are little girls. Dr. Campbell said that in all of his years of research and all of his years of practice, he has never known a single human being with a sexual dysfunction who had a father who was gentle and affectionate and compassionate and loving and kind, and some of those other feminine qualities. There's still a bunch of those macho men who say, "I ain't gonna kiss my little boy and make a sissy out of him." The absolute opposite is true. The kids are starved for skin. They want hugging. They want to know that you care. And fellas, I'll say the same thing about your wives. Let me tell you something. They resent it when you ignore them all day and then give them your undivided attention when the lights go out. And as a practical matter, I'll just flat tell you, if you gripe about the mashed potatoes at supper or dinner, all you're going to get the rest of the evening is cold shoulder. Your relationship. I believe we are hungry all over this land for people who are willing to hug when hug is all they're interested in. Step number 4, learn to greet people in person. If somebody asks you, "How you doing?" Instead of the old negatives that you often hear, "Well, fine since it's Friday," or "Good since I get off in 20 minutes," or "Great since it's payday." And don't you love it when some people, as my good friend Roy Hatton says, when they pull themselves up to their full height and say, "Well, under the circumstances." I mean, it makes you wonder what they're doing under there in the first place, doesn't it? Now, the next time somebody asks you, "How you doing?" why don't you just tell them the truth? Why don't you say, "Outstanding, but I'm improving," or "Super good, but I'll get better"? And you might say, "But Zig, suppose I'm not doing super good. Am I telling the truth?" Of course you're telling the truth. You're just telling it in advance. That's all. Why wait on the good stuff? Claim it now. Enjoy it now. Step number 6, to build that winning attitude, we need to shape up. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry, you know what I just did? I skipped step number 5. Hey, don't want to do that. Step number 5, cancel that one. As we'd say down home, some folks could foul up a 2-car parade. And so let's back up to step number 5. For 27 hours a year, you do something that's kind of neat. that we have to do. You know, negative Americans amaze me, and yet so many of them are so negative, they call those electrical appliances on the street corners red lights or stoplights or traffic lights. But they really are put there to make traffic go. So the reality is they are go lights. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever been at one of those go lights, and you're going to spend 27 hours a year, incidentally, waiting on the right color, and you're sitting there waiting on the right color to come along. You're all excited, you're all enthused, you're highly motivated, you're listening to your Zig Ziglar tapes. And you look out the side of your eye, and you can't believe what you're seeing. Here sits a guy over here, and he's waiting on the right color to come along, but he's got a good firm grip on that steering wheel. I mean, he doesn't want that car to go anywhere. Got his mouth fixed exactly right just in case he has to talk to that thing. And you can't believe it. You're watching him. He's got his foot on the accelerator. He's racing the engine, trying to change the color of the light. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have actually ever seen some dodo sit there racing a car motor trying to change the color of the light? Can I see your hand, please? Folks, I hate to be negative. Matter of fact, I won't be negative. I'll be like that little boy came home from school one day and said, Dad, I'm afraid I flunked that arithmetic test. His dad said, son, that's negative. Be positive. He said, Dad, I'm positive I flunked that arithmetic test. I'm absolutely positive that by racing that car motor, you're not going to change the color of that light. Now, every once in a while, and I know we got some very prominent, enormously successful people watching this, and some of them are very sophisticated, and I know some of them say, well, I certainly would not say super good, but I'll get better, or outstanding, but I'm improved. I just wouldn't say things like that. That's a little amateurish. That's even a little juvenile. Well, friend, if you think it's juvenile to say super good, but I'll get better, just what do you think it is to sit there and race that car motor trying to change the color of the light? Now, that's just not going to work. Good friend of mine, Bernie Loftic in Winnipeg, Canada, is really more a brother. Bernie is the most positive human being I've ever seen. He's so positive he's never had a cold. Once in a great while he has a warm. He's so positive he won't even talk about the weekend. He says that's negative. He calls it the strong end. And you might say, now come on, Ziglar, you got to be kidding me. Super good, strong ends, go lights, all of that kind of stuff. Is that necessary? No, you can be mediocre without it. Mediocre? Who does that dude think he's talking to? I'm the president of my own company. Mediocre? I'm worth over $10 million. Mediocre? Why, I have led the nation in sales every year for the last 3 years. Mediocre? I've got 2 PhDs. Well, bully for you. I still say mediocre, because success is not measured by what you've done compared to what somebody else has done. You might have 10 times the ability they have. Success, real success, is measured by what you've done with the ability you have compared to what you could have done with the ability you have. This procedure is not designed to help you beat anybody. This is designed to make you number one. You see, everybody can't be the biggest and the fastest and the strongest and the smartest, but everybody can be number one. And you are number one when you get up every morning and look yourself in the mirror and say, today I'm going to give it my best shot. You're number one when at the end of that day you can get back in front of that mirror and say, today I gave it my best shot. You're number one with the one who is the most important as far as your success is concerned. So step number 5, if somebody asks you, ladies and gentlemen, directions, instead of saying you go down to the red light, tell them the truth. You say you go down to the go light. And the minute you say go light, you'll grin just like you walk through a swinging door on somebody else's push. I mean, you'll get excited about it because it will remind you of today. It'll bring you right back in your own mind right here, and your whole pattern of thinking will be lifted. Step number 6, shape up physically. Now, when I talk about shaping up physically, there are about 3 factors involved. Remember, we deal with the physical, we deal with the mental, we deal with the spiritual. The first thing in shaping up physically is you need to get enough sleep. The evidence is overwhelming that when you sleep, that's the only time certain chemicals are reproduced in your brain. And these chemicals are necessary to keep your body in balance. If you do not get enough sleep, the first thing you lose is that incredible energy. The second thing you lose is you lose that alertness that makes a difference. And third, you become more susceptible to becoming addicted to prescription drugs or the illegal drugs. So get enough sleep. What is enough? I don't know, but you do. If you have to fight your way awake every morning, try getting a little extra sleep. If that doesn't work, see your doctor. You might need a physical. Then you need to get on a proper diet and exercise program. There are many good books today that you really need to look into if you're really going to take care of your health. A lot of times, as I've said earlier, I am a jogger. Many times people ask me, when do you have time to jog? But the reality is when you exercise, whether it's a fast walk or bouncing up on down and down on rebounds or riding stationary bicycles or bicycles in the street or swimming, whatever you do, you activate that pituitary gland. It floods the system with endorphins. Your energy level goes up. Your creativity goes up. I run 5 days a week, and I find my energy level is always higher for the next 2 to 5 hours. I don't spend time exercising. I invest time and get a tremendous return. Third thing to do about your physical conditioning, folks, is avoid the poisons. Now, there's some people who get a little uncomfortable when I say this, but I've got to tell you what I know is truth. There's an old saying that you can deny truth, but you cannot avoid it. The day is going to come when it will be there. Every time you light up a cigarette, you have just decided to die 16 minutes earlier than you otherwise would have died. I'm talking about something very serious, folks. 390,000 people a year die as a direct result of smoking. 150,000 die as a direct result of drinking. We do know that every time you take a drink, that it kills certain brain cells. And I don't know how many brain cells you got. Personally, I don't have a single one to spare. I encourage you, do the things that will make you the most functional. I've even had certain people say, well, Zig, I take a drink, it sharpens me up, man, gives me that little edge. Now, me and you both know you don't really believe that. Let me tell you why I know we both don't believe it. Here's why. If you were faced with major surgery, would you insist that surgeon has a little snort just before he opens you up? No way. And you're not as sharp either. If you really want to build a winning attitude, step number 7, you need to give it your best shot. Whatever it is that you do, give it your best effort. Now, in corporate America, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the worker who has said, I will be there at 8 o'clock, that's when my day starts, and I'll stay to 5, I believe most of them will do exactly that. But the question is, how do they get there at 8 o'clock? Here's what I've noticed. I've noticed that most of them get there absolutely in a dead run. I mean, that last 200 yards, they get there. I mean, they are all huffing and puffing. Oh, boy, traffic was there. I didn't think I was going to make it. Man alive, they're unpacking their gear, and they make their way back to the coffee room. They get them a cup of coffee, and they come back, and they finish unpacking it. And 10 minutes after their pay starts, then they go to work. Now, if they're supposed to work until 5 o'clock, I believe the American worker is a conscientious, sincere individual, and I believe that if they're supposed to be there at, that particular time and stay there until 5 o'clock, I believe they stay until 5 o'clock. But if you could turn the video cameras on corporate America, all over America at 5 o'clock, here's what you'd see. The workers run a three-point stance, the bell rings, and boom, like they're shot out of a cannon. What they do then is they get out of there. Now they talk about the freeways being dangerous today. Let me tell you where the danger is. It's trying to get out of corporate headquarters and out of the parking lot. That's where the danger is. Let me tell you something. You want to get ahead in what you're doing? My friend, let me encourage you. Get there 10 minutes early. Be ready to go at 8 o'clock. That's so important. Stay there until 5 o'clock, and then you pack up at 5 o'clock, and then you leave. Dr. Joyce Brothers says, you cannot consistently perform in a manner which is inconsistent with the way that you see yourself. This will do so many wonderful things for your image because you know you are doing what you're being paid to do. You're accepting responsibility. You're disciplining yourself to do the job properly. And I'll tell you something else. The boss is looking. And those first 10 minutes and those last 10 minutes definitely will make an impression. Give it your best shot. When I was a boy down in Yazoo City, Mississippi, I was born in L.A., that's Lower Alabama. But when I was in Yazoo City, Mississippi, I worked in a grocery store. In those Depression years, we used to borrow merchandise from other stores. Charlie Scott was the runner from across the street. And Charlie used to come running in our store to borrow food from us. Like if his store ran out of tomatoes, he'd come running over there and say, Mr. Anderson, who owned our store, I need to borrow a half-dozen cans of tomatoes. And Mr. Anderson would say, okay, Charlie, you know where they are, go get them. And old Charlie would go off in a mad dash. He'd grab up the half-dozen cans of tomatoes. He'd bring them back. He'd plop them down on that counter, you know. He'd scribble his name on the receipt, and he would take off like a scalded duck. And one day I said, Mr. Anderson, how come Charlie Scott always runs? Mr. Anderson kind of smiled, and he said, well, he always runs because Charlie Scott is working for a raise, and he's going to get it, too. I said, Mr. Anderson, how you know Charlie Scott going to get a raise? He said, I know Charlie Scott's going to get a raise because if the man he's working for doesn't give it to him, I am. It's an absolute fact of life that when you do more than you're paid to do, you will eventually be paid more for what you do. I was speaking at Clarksville. I was speaking in Clarksville, Mississippi, at the University of Mississippi State. When I finished that seminar, a tall, red-headed gentleman came up to me, and he said, Mr. Ziglar, he said, when have you last seen Charlie Scott? I said, well, I left for the Navy back in 1944. Charlie is 2 years older than I am. He left 2 years before then. I haven't seen him since. He said, you probably wouldn't even know him, would you? And I said, no, I really wouldn't. He said, I didn't think so. He said, I'm Charlie Scott. His friends told me that Charlie Scott had taken the lessons of childhood until they became the instincts of his adult life. At age 50, he retired a very wealthy man. I simply am saying this to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that it makes no difference where you start. That if you will take these principles that we've been talking about throughout this entire seminar, that they in fact will enable you, by utilizing the principles, by developing the qualities which we have identified, by applying yourself, by giving it your absolute best shot, that you can start from where you are and get the things you want in life. I will remind you yet one more time that failure is an event. It is not a person. I will remind you that regardless of what's happened in the past, the future can absolutely be magnificent. I also will encourage you to spend some of the time of your life with the ones that you love. Our research states beyond any reasonable doubt that if we have balance in our life, we're going to be able to accomplish more of our objectives than if we only have that one financial objective. And again, I'm not putting money down, but there are a lot of other things that go along with it. I close with this Believe in you. You were created by God in His own image. He loves you. He wants the best for you. Believe in your fellow human beings. Believe in what you're doing. Give it your best shot. Believe in the good old USA. I've been almost all over the world, folks. There's not another land like it. How lucky we are to be here. Take advantage of its opportunities. And finally, had I been on trial for my life, and had you been my judge and my jury, and had you commissioned me to tell you the things that you needed to do to get the most out of your life, with my very life at stake, I would have said to you exactly what I have said. So take these steps, follow these procedures, because if you do, I'll see you, and yes, I really do mean you, at the top. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Zig Ziglar.
Thank you.
Has this been an incredible day for you? Let's give Zig one more well-deserved round of applause. I've worked with Zig for over 20 years and over 250 appearances, and never has he been better than he was today for you, the SNA audience, here in Salt Lake City and Portland and Kansas City. You know, I kind of hate to see our day here together come to an end, but I guess it's really just a new beginning for each of us, isn't it? We now have the challenge to take these valuable, life-changing principles we've learned here today and incorporate them into our everyday lives. That's a true test for us, because when the excitement of the moment fades away and we're caught once again in the daily grind, it's much too easy to forget that these are the vital issues which determine the quality of our lives, our happiness, our success, and indeed, our personal destiny is solely up to each one of us.